Okay, welcome back to the Mental Toughness Podcast.org, O-R-G. Mental Toughness Podcast.org. I'm Steve Siebold, I'm your host, and I want to just to encourage you guys to subscribe to the podcast, whether you want to watch the podcast on the website or listen to it, depending on how you absorb your content. Just go and sign up and we'll send you a weekly email letting you know about the new episode that drops. We do this once a week. And so mentaltoughness.podcast.org. Okay, so today I want to talk about one of the things that creates mental toughness inside a performer. And I think it's one of the most overlooked aspects of mental toughness training. I learned this years ago, back in the early 80s when I was an athlete. And when sports psychology really wasn't a thing back then. Sports psychology came into play with the Olympics, the Olympic Committee, when I was working with Olympians toward the end of the 80s, early 90s. That's when sports psychology really became a thing, but it really wasn't even a part of psychology, in terms of being a department or a discipline, you might say. But psychologists did talk about sports psychology. They just didn't call it that. And so one of the things that I learned was, you want to decide if you're working with someone, then get help from them, like a psychologist, sports psychologist, or performance psychologist. But if you're on your own, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're an athlete, or whatever you are, whatever you need mental toughness for, you want to decide what your core values are in life. Your core values. Now you might be saying, well, what does that got to do with mental toughness? Well, it turns out it has everything to do with it, because when push comes to shove, and you're frustrated. Let's say you're an entrepreneur. Let's say you're a business person. Let's say you're a professional building a dental practice or a chiropractic practice or law practice. Or those are the types of people, typically performers, that would be listening to a mental toughness podcast. I mean, let's be honest, most people don't care about mental toughness until you need it, until it's a make or break. Most people, don't care about it. They think, well, what do I need mental toughness for? That seems like a lot of work. Toughness, that doesn't seem attractive. Well, if you're an athlete, it's incredibly attractive, right? If you're a business person and you don't have mental toughness and things get rough, you're going to go out of business, or you're going to go, do something else, which you don't have to worry 24 hours a day about. You might get a job, you might start a career, you might go back to school, whatever it is, but you're going to do something that has less resistance. And so, but if you're in the fight, then mental toughness means everything. And identifying your core values, like what do you care about most? What do you hold in the highest regard in life? Not just in business, not just in sport, whatever you're in. I mean in life. What do you value the most? Okay, because when push comes to shove and things get tough and money's tight, relationships are broken, there's a setback in the business, you lose you lost your best customer, or maybe you're a politician and you lost a big election. I remember when Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump in 2016. She was a shoo-in. There was no way she could lose. He had no experience whatsoever in politics, and she had a lifetime of experience. But, for whatever reason, and, the rest of that argument is just political, but she lost, and it was kind of unbelievable to Donald Trump as well. I've known Donald Trump for 25 years. I watched it when he accepted the call from Hillary Clinton saying that he had won the election, and she was congratulating him and that kind of thing. I'm sure that was begrudgingly, but I saw it at 3:00 in the morning. I was up because I'd known Trump for years, and I wanted to see how he would react. And he reacted like he was absolutely shocked. Like, I have seen him in a lot of different situations for 25 years. Going to Mar-a-Lago over the years, because we live right down the street, and he was a client of ours for 15 years. And, I've seen him react to a lot of things in a lot of ways. He doesn't hide anything. He is not a good hider. He wears his emotions on a sleeve. He doesn't have any kind of sophistication whatsoever. He's like a 14-year-old. He's just whatever he's thinking, he wears it on his face. Anyway, so when I stayed up to see how he would react, because I thought he was going to lose. And he was shocked. He just couldn't believe he had won, and no one else could either. Especially, I'm sure Hillary Clinton felt the same way. But he was absolutely shocked, right? So all of a sudden, you can imagine, Trump is one thing, really. That's another thing to really talk about. Now he's got to be president. Knowing Trump, I can hear him, I wasn't around during that. He wasn't around, and I wasn't around him during that time, for several years before the election. So I don't know what he was thinking, but I imagine what he said to his inner circle before that was, look, we're going to get a marketing thing going here. I'm going to say I'm going to run for president. I'll do some debates. I'll do some stuff. We'll lose, but, we'll get some great publicity out of it because that's all he thinks about. And so I think that's what he was going for. And all of a sudden, he's got to be president. All right, well, love him, hate him, whatever. You still got to do the job at some level, right? So you got to have mental toughness to do that. And so he's calling on his mental toughness. Now, on the other side, Hillary Clinton lost, and now she's got to have the mental toughness to go on. She's just been defeated, and she was going to be the first woman president, and probably should have been. I know a lot of people don't like Hillary Clinton, which is probably the reason she's not president. She's not very likable, I suppose, but she is qualified. I think that's hard to argue with that, even if you don't like her. And so anyway, the point of it is that she's got to deal with this mentally. How do you deal with it mentally? How do you get back on the horse when you've just been defeated in a worldwide event that is almost embarrassing? You're losing to a person that doesn't basically even have a basic understanding about history. Trump doesn't even read books. I'm telling you, I was around the guy for a long time. He doesn't even read. He's very uneducated in terms of current events. As you could tell when he was president, he didn't know half the stuff he was talking about. And that's with advisors, around him all the time. So that takes a level of mental toughness too for him to be able to get, plow through it and fake it, which, I think he did in a lot of ways. So knowing your core values, like, again, if you're Hillary Clinton and you lose that election in 2016, then how does she wake up the next day and go forward? Well, we would say, if I was coaching her, which I'm not, but if I was, I would say, what do you care about the most? You care about the country, right? You care about what happens to women's rights, like Roe v. Wade. If Clinton would have been in office, I don't think Roe v. Wade would be being threatened. It might be me, but I might be wrong. But I think she would have protected that pretty closely, and among a bunch of other things that are her core values that I don't know. But when it really gets tough, when it's at its very toughest, you want to know what you care about, what you'll fight for, and what you'll die for. Those are the questions we typically ask people to ask themselves. What do you care about the most? What are your values? What will you fight for? And what will you die for? Okay, let's take it to what just happened in Texas, right? Uvalde, Texas. I think that's how you say it. These little kids, have died. 19 little kids. They're 10-year-old kids. It's just, and they say these, the AR-15 or the two AR-15s that the shooter used. It's just the kids couldn't even be identified. It's just horrible. There's just no way to over exaggerate the pain that these, estimate the pain that these families are going through. But now, if you've been watching this crazy thing, and I think all of us have now, and I don't want to make a big pitch against the police because I don't know the facts, but it seems as though, and the records show right now, that the cops got there and they waited an hour to go in the school. An hour. They got a guy with two AR-15s, a freaking lunatic with two AR-15s in a school with 10-year-old kids who are calling 911 because their friends are being shot, the teachers are being shot, and they're calling and they're gathering outside for an hour. Those kids had no chance. It's amazing more kids weren't killed even. What the hell were the police doing outside? Now, again, maybe that's what they had to do. Maybe there's something I don't know about. So I don't want to have a big indictment here against the Uvalde Police Department or anyone else for that matter, because I don't know all the facts, and I'm sure they'll come out. But at the same time this was happening, who was screaming and yelling, literally kicking their feet, getting put in handcuffs? The mothers of the kids and the fathers of the little kids. They were screaming. They were threatening to put them in. The police were threatening to put them in jail. They wanted to go in. They wanted to go in without guns. Why would they go in? Why would they run into a building with a shooter, an active shooter with an AR-15 because their 10-year-old kid is in the class? And if they got to die in the process, then they got to die in the process. That's what parents do for kids. That's their job. They have to do it. Well, I think it's the police force's job too. I think that's what they get paid for, right? It's like Bill Maher said on a show the other day, we're always kissing up and I have a lot of respect for police. I'm the police. So I don't want to beat them up, but in general or anything like that. But, we do kind of celebrate these guys a lot and we do kind of kiss up to them a little bit. And I don't mind doing that because they're doing a tough job. They don't get paid anything to do it. And so I'm fine with that. But when push comes to shove and you got to go in and kids are being threatened or people are being threatened, that's your job. Yeah, it's dangerous. Guess what? You don't want your job? Go work at Walmart or go work somewhere where, I don't want the job. I'm not saying I would do it either. I'm just saying that's part of the job. This is when it counts. It doesn't count. Giving people traffic tickets doesn't count. But apparently, they were told not to go in. So, most of them did. They all did what they were told to do. So I'm sure it's the leader that's at fault here. But at the same time, I'm not sure if I was one of those cops that I could have held back. That's your job. Those kids they're calling 911. These are little kids. They're going to die. And a lot of them did because the cops didn't go in. But going back to the values, okay, the parents were screaming and hollering to go in with no guns, with no bulletproof vests like the cops had. They were just going to run in. If those mothers had guns, that gunman would have been taken down in 5 minutes. You don't hold back mama when her cubs are inside getting threatened. That's a real bad idea. Dad is dangerous. Mom is really dangerous, because her value, her whole life is that kid or those kids. And if that's her value system, she has to die in the process, she'll die in the process. That's why identifying values are so important when things like this happen or when you're in a high performance situation, when you're doing a presentation that's going to make or break your business or your career, or you're in a sports situation where it's really tense, or you've just got annihilated in some business deal and now you've got to pick yourself up off the ground. This is when it counts, where you say, what do I really care about? And I don't have kids, so I don't want to say too much about that because I'm not really qualified to talk about kids. But I did teach kids tennis for 8 years. And they were little, they started out to be little kids. I had most of them for the 8-year period. And they were 8, 9, 10 years old, and they went all the way up until they went to college. And I remember one time, when they were with me for 2 or 3 hours a day after school, 4 or 5 days a week, whatever it was, they were under my protection. And I'm not a cop. I was a tennis pro, right? But God forbid anyone tried to hurt those kids when they were on that tennis court, when they're under my protection. I had one time, one of the kids was about, 14 or 15. And I got to know the kids really well. And, obviously over a period of years, they kind of were like my kids. And, in a way, I'm their teacher, tennis teacher. But, you get to know them and they're just as good at kids as I had a very good group of kids, just salt of the earth kids in Florida. And one of the kids came to me and he was all stressed out and everything. And this was not his normal disposition. And he came up to me and I said, "What's wrong? What's going on?" He said, "These bullies are threatening me at school, and tomorrow they're gonna corner me in the parking lot and they're gonna beat me up and all these things. And I'm just really stressed out. These are big kids and everything." And this kid was the nicest kid in the world. Like no one, I don't know what happened, and it's not my business. But I said, "Well, can you tell your mom and dad? What can we do here? Because the kid was just stressed to the max." And he's on my tennis court, and I feel like I'm partly responsible, so I'm trying to kind of help him. And so he didn't feel like he could go to his parents. For whatever reason, there were 4 of these kids, and he was one kid. And he was a pretty big kid, but he was 1 against 4. And he was credible. This was not a kid that cried wolf. This kid was credible. He was he is a very, very smart kid. And today he's a multimillionaire, a young multimillionaire, self-made millionaire. But anyway, so I was very concerned about it. I didn't get a lot of sleep that night. He said it was going to happen the next day after school in the parking lot. And so it was this Christian school right down the street from where I taught tennis. So I couldn't sleep. I thought, I've got to do something. So I went to that next day, I went to the school and I demanded to see the principal. I didn't know the principal, but it's a small town. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. And I went to him. He's an older guy. And I said, I demanded it. He said he's not available. I said, I need to see him. It's an absolute emergency. Like this was not going to happen on my watch. But I thought I could thwart it by going to the principal. Christian school. So got me in his office and he said, "How can I help you? What emergency?" I told him a story. He said, he laughed a little bit. He said, "It's a Christian school. That's not going to happen. We'll protect him." I said, "Well, what are you going to do to protect him? It's going to happen today in the parking lot. It's a big parking lot. What are you going to do?" He said, "Well, we'll figure out something. Thank you for your concern. You don't really have any connection to the school." I said, "He's my student." And I said, so I need to know it's going to be taken care of, and I need to know it from you now. And I was not taking no for an answer. I said, because if you don't protect him, I will show up and I will protect him. And you won't like what I do to these 4 kids if they attack him. And he said, "Well, you better not show up because you're on private property. We're private." And he got into it. And I said, "Look, I'm not looking for a problem here. You're a Christian school, supposedly," and they are. And I said, "You need to protect your Christian students or whatever you want to, label them. You need to protect them." And he laughed it off. And I knew that he wouldn't do it. And and because he just laughed, he blew it off. He said, oh, well, we'll take care of it. I'll look into it. And I said, it's today. It's in like 3 hours. So I worried about it. I canceled my lesson at that particular time when the school got out. And I got a baseball bat out of my closet. I put it in my car. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I was going to do something, And so I got in my car and I drove to the parking lot and I looked for my student. And he walked out, and I rushed the car over to him, and I put the bat, where he didn't see it because I didn't really want him to see that. I didn't really want him to see that unless I needed to do something. And the 4 kids were around the corner, and they saw me, and I pulled the bat out. I had to, and I put it right by my side on the car, and I looked at him like, if you come near us, if you try to hurt this kid, I'm going to hurt all 4 of you. And here's my point. Luckily, what happened, long story short, was nothing happened. They were scared, and they should have been scared because I wasn't bluffing. I mean, when someone's under your protection, and my point of this whole thing of the story is my value system is if a kid is under my protection, I will die defending him. That's part of my value system. Good, bad, in between. You might agree, you might disagree, you might say it's not my place, whatever. But for me to identify my values when someone that's under my, I don't want to say just protection, but supervision. At that time, and those kids were he was under my supervision as a tennis player for 7 or 8 years before that. This kid grew up with me, basically. I mean, part of the time, and I was an important figure in his life, and he was an important figure in mine, frankly. And so, that was not going to go down well. That was not going to end well. So I just stood there and I looked at them like, they kind of came up and they didn't say anything. They just looked at me and I looked at them like, you don't want to do this because this is not, you're not going to come out of this well. And the truth is, we got in the car and I drove them off. And I said, you let them know I'll be back. And if they do anything, I will find them. I'll hunt them down. And don't think I won't do it. He said, I know you'll do it. I know. And I'll let him. So anyway, so it worked out. He never got hurt. I don't know how it resolved itself, but it resolved itself luckily. Right. But, I was telling my wife about it, later that night, and she said, "Gee, Steve, you got a bat. You're at a high school. You got a baseball bat. You're 30 years old. These kids are 15 or whatever. What did you plan on doing? I mean, you're just threatening them." I said, "No. If they would have come up and they'd have hurt that kid, I'd have beat them all with a baseball bat. And if they would have tried to hurt him more, I'd have killed them." I said, I'm telling you, I'm not fooling around because I'm not looking for a problem here. But you're not going to hurt someone that's under my protection if I have something to say about it. And this jerk off, principal, this Christian school thinks it's a joke. Well, I don't think it's a joke. That that's not going to happen on my watch. It may happen on his. And he heard about it and it was a whole thing, but luckily nothing happened. So nothing became of it. There were no charges filed against me or anything like that because nothing happened. But the bottom line, my point of the whole thing is that, again, I almost can feel, I know the whole story with Uvalde, with these cops. But I do feel for a lot of them because I imagine that a lot of them wanted to go in and they didn't. And they're going to have to live with that for the rest of their lives. That they didn't go in. They're cops. They got guns. They got bulletproof vests and they let those kids die without trying. Now I know. They have a boss. Everyone's got a boss, right? Everyone's got a client or a customer boss or a boss in a company or whatever. Everyone answers to someone or some institution or something. So I get it. You got to follow orders. You can't go rogue. They were probably just taking orders from their commander, the police chief or whoever was in charge. But they still got to live with it because they still could have gone in. They could have said, you know what? Damn the job. I'll get fired. I'm going in. I'm not letting these kids get slaughtered. And they did get slaughtered. And they're going to have to think about that, every one of those cops, for the rest of their lives. What if? They're trained at this, This is what these people train for. They don't train to give parking tickets and walk elderly ladies across the street. That's not what they train for. They train for active shooter situations. They train for danger, and they failed those children. They got to live with it for the rest of their lives. I'll tell you, that's worse than taking a bullet. I'd rather take a bullet than live with the guilt that I let a bunch of kids get slaughtered. And I had a gun and training and a bulletproof vest. Okay, so just to wrap this up, I want you to think, this is just an example, but when you tap into your highest values, the things that are the strongest, that you will fight for and die for, and then you connect those values to your performance, to your practice, to your concentration, to your discipline, to your diet if you're an athlete, to your exercise regimen if you're an athlete, as a business, to your work ethic as an entrepreneur or a business person or a professional. When you connect your highest values and you use that emotional motivation, like you say, well, I'm a lawyer because I want to defend people that can't afford to defend themselves or are wrong somehow, or I want to be a doctor and I want to help people that can't get treatment somehow, or I want to help people survive. Whatever your core values are, that's probably why you're in that business or that field, because you believe in it that much. It's, people say, well, people do a lot of things for money. Yeah, and mostly they do things for emotion. We're emotional creatures, right? We don't go into professions typically just to get rich. We go into professions to make a difference, because that's what rewards us emotionally more than money will ever reward us at the end of the day. So I just want to recommend, identify your 5 most treasured, highly valued values in your life, and then connect them to your business, to whatever your performance field is. And when you do that, you're unstoppable. No one can stop you. It's just amazing. You won't quit no matter how many times you fail. So think about that, and I'll look forward to hearing you on the next podcast and next episode. Remember to subscribe at mentaltoughness.podcast.org. Subscribe. We'll send you out an email every week to catch the next episode. Until then, I'll see you next time.